I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
I think when a lot of people think of everything's perfect or wholeness or alignment, flow, whatever words they like to use, harmony, truth, somehow they subtract out conflict.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. We're launching a radio show based on the podcast, and we're looking for questions from listeners about relationships. If you have a question or if you'd like some advice about your relationship, give us a call and leave us a message at 415-483-5112. I'll put that phone number in our show notes in case you didn't get it just now. Now on to the show. Today's episode is part 2 of an interview with my very favorite spiritual teacher, Mukti. If you haven't heard part 1, definitely don't miss it. She's too good to skip. In today's interview, we'll hear Mukti's thoughts on intimacy and love. So with that, let's go to part 2 of our interview with Mukti.
But I would say one of the hallmarks of how I think we relate that has been kind of like a way, something to steer by, you could say, is that there's just been this real natural interest in both of us from the very beginning in the happiness of the other person. And so because that's so built into who each of us are as individuals, you could maybe say as personalities or something, but it feels deeper than personality. There's just this real caring that the other person get to enjoy with happiness. You know, so there's a way that we just inherently are taking care of each other, and that's so built into the dynamics that whether there's conflict, which is quite rare for us, or there's just day-to-day relating, it's often like a whole expression of either happiness to be with one another or interest in the other one's happiness when we're working through when we're maneuvering things.
Do you think you can cultivate that with anyone, or was it natural?
Well, I know for us it was natural. I kind of have wondered the same question because I think in some ways I was brought up to be oriented that way, particularly by my mother. And, like to be in service to others around you, like just continue, like she lives and breathes it. And that's what brings meaning. That's that for her, and I believe, I can't really speak for her, but that would be my interpretation. And that's kind of how I felt I had a place in the world, even so you could say that was part of my conditioning. But I also feel like I was so at home in it that perhaps it's something much more innate. I don't know. Now, there are times when, I'm with people where it's really clear to put that down. This is not about, somebody's happiness, short-term happiness anyway, in a given moment. It's about, addressing what's happening, if it feels on the mark or off the mark, or as I was saying earlier, if it feels healthy or really unhealthy, or I'm really good. I mean, I'm not about really good, but I've been told that I I'm not a pushover in a lot of situations where I'll call things. So it's not like I'm always in some like kind of Pollyanna like reality of just like making everybody happy all the time. But it's kind of like a almost like a set point that I return to quite naturally, like over and over again.
The set point of
Of just orienting toward happiness.
Mm.
And specifically just sensing that in others around me.
I often find that there's nothing to do. I often come down to a sense that everything is just perfect. Really, everything's perfect. There's nothing to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And this conversation, the premise of this conversation sort of starts from a different place than that. The premise of this conversation that I've been having in these podcasts starts from a place that there's a perceived challenge. There's something there's something unaligned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that by being completely transparent about our experience, we can have that, whatever it is, be realigned.
Mm.
And that's sort of the foundation of the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
So it all comes from it really works through transparency about our experience.
Mm-hmm.
But talking with you, it was almost like taking an eraser over the chalkboard writing of what's wrong and recalling that there's nothing really wrong. There's nothing really wrong.
Mm.
And nothing to talk about as a result.
Mm. It strikes me that reminds me incredibly of love.
How's that? I like it, but I don't know what you mean.
Well, you ever had that feeling when you're around someone who you just feel like consummately loves you? That, just all your like quirks, foibles, peculiarities, troubles, whatever it is, but all your like fantasticness, that they just love you, like the whole package, and so there's not so much to work out or talk about, because love doesn't really operate that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that things won't be addressed, but like the underlying or the almost like the air is just kind of coated with that sense that everything's totally okay.
Yeah, you'll still eat food and be hungry and want to talk about things when you stub your toe and what, and it's all of that is occurring in like the house of everything's perfect.
Yeah, I mean you could say perfect or everything's just
Okay.
Yeah, everything's like
The other thing that was interesting, has been interesting about this conversation is like the futility of talking about anything with words that you were talking about.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it was
an attempt.
Yeah, I'm not even saying that like it was a failed attempt. I'm just saying I'm actually
I didn't get that.
Yeah, no, because what I'm actually saying is it was actually like a very effective attempt because ultimately what you said was there's nothing to talk about. Like, I mean, really, ultimately.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm glad you got that out of it. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being on the show. I like to. So now there's a little game I like to play at the end of shows.
Okay.
But I still want to say, was there anything else that you wanted to say before we go to the game?
Let me just take a moment,
Okay.
knowing full well I can take the time. When I think of all the various people I've talked to in my life who are interested in conversations about primary relationship, there's this part of me that really just wants to tell them, and I tell all of you listening, just be really, really careful in all the energy that can go into framing primary relationship as a realm to work things through, to fix yourself, fix the other person. That primary relationship is something so, so precious that it requires a kind of delicacy that all the fix-it projects can tend to steamroll. And it can be something that can be felt to be very sacred. And so my wish for people is just to attend to it like it's something sacred, like nourish it and have a tremendous regard for it first and foremost, instead of what I often feel happens, which is somehow first and foremost the focus is on what's wrong and how to fix it. And I know it's not all about that for people, or else, there wouldn't be a draw to the primary relationship. But so often it comes back to that kind of framework. And there's a real, almost like danger in that if it just continues to go back to that and be looked at through that framework predominantly, then something really precious and sacred is going to be not only missed, but is going to atrophy because it won't have the energy that it needs to really be nurtured from that deep knowledge of what we were just concluding with, that what we not that you were saying this, but what we inherently are is something, really, really beautiful, that isn't, that from the eyes of love isn't perceived as something that's a problem or something, broken or in need of questioning too much. So it's a real, like, even though what I'm speaking about could feel subtle, it's a real deliberate intention to switch the dynamic from a problem paradigm to a acknowledgement of, like, from a problem paradigm of fixing what's broken to an acknowledgement of innate wholeness. Yeah.
Well, that theme has been so clear through everything you've said.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to fix, and it is sacred. Mm-hmm. Or it's whole, and it's sacred.
Mm-hmm. It's not to ignore that, on the relative level, there can be an experience of, hey, this can improve, or this, this can be course corrected. And sometimes what people will, at a very, very deep level, believe is that if they start to acknowledge wholeness, that will be ignoring things that don't feel quite right, and that the things that don't feel quite right will never be addressed. But what I've seen in my experience is that things can be addressed even more effectively when we're moving from that paradigm of wholeness or paradigm of all that we are and all that we can be and express as, then when we're moving from there, then there's energy that automatically just kind of overflows into, okay, that abundance of being can flow into this area that feels off and can, buoy it and begin to alter it and bring it into harmony with the whole or with alignment. But there's some deep fear in people in this paradigm of okayness, you could say, in the name of a fear that says, if I let go of the problem-solving paradigm, then things will never be okay. But they don't get that they can start from a sense of acknowledging okayness right here, right now, before the fixing. And then from that sense of okayness and well-being, things that were formerly perceived as problem may not be perceived that way anymore.
I've been trying to put this concept into words. Maybe you can help me. Mm-hmm. I have this sense that you can't have a game without rules, mm-hmm. or boundaries, mm-hmm. or risk. You can't have a game without the possibility of losing the game. And then I think about, like a board game that's obvious, or mm-hmm. or a video game. You have to fight the bad guy, and if you lose, then your character dies. Mm-hmm. Let's go back and try to fight the bad guy again. Mm-hmm. It's no fun if you could just beat everybody. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I think about the experience that I have in this life, mm-hmm. of, things that I try to get done, and some of them do get done, and some of them don't. And sometimes things hurt, and sometimes they're super pleasurable. Yeah. And then underlying all that is this felt sense of, everything is just fine. That I was expressing earlier is everything is perfect. I think you're saying in some ways is everything is whole, or mm-hmm. there is a sense of wholeness, which feels like the most fundamental possible truth. And yet there's this ongoing experience of a game mm-hmm. that is still happening, and all these boundaries which mm-hmm. don't have the same grit and realness that they did in a certain time in my past. Is now mm-hmm. they don't, they're still there, but they just don't have as much significance, mm-hmm. I guess.
Yeah. Hold on you maybe, or something.
Yeah. And I mean, I want this podcast to be a success. That would be great. And there's things I need to do for that. And I'm sitting in this physical chair, and, my body's in it. It's not smooshing out of it. So I think about this concept of conflict that I brought up with you during mm-hmm. our conversation about your relationship. And I'm trying to fit conflict into the video game. Mm-hmm. Like the concept of conflict is almost like the walls, the boundaries of the game. Mm-hmm. Because it's around, conflict, like bumping into thingsness.
Yeah.
Is around.
It is.
And I'm curious about it. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about our attachment to it, and our fear of it, and our obsession with it. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have that much of a hold on me these days.
Yeah.
And that is, it's that curiosity that informed mm-hmm. the early part of our conversation for me.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that came across. How did that read for you? That curiosity.
I can't remember.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to say something, but it's not really directly answering your question.
Well, if you want to say something, I want to hear it.
Okay. Well, it feels like, let me just take a second. Believe it or not, I just dropped the thought. I think when a lot of people think of everything's perfect or wholeness or alignment, flow, whatever words they like to use, harmony, truth, somehow they subtract out conflict.
Which is part of the whole flow.
And people think if there's conflict, there's no flow. If there's conflict, there's division. There's separation. There's no wholeness. But the funny thing about it, and this is like getting kind of wordy and conceptual, but the funny thing about it is in the one or in the whole of all of what we are, it includes conflict. Now, when you deeply get that, it feels like you're bringing this forward in this podcast, that if there can be some sense that, sure, conflict is one of the many ways that the one can appear. Another way we could say it is even, the totality or the one shows up as unconsciousness or ego or conditioning, or just, not agreeing or not being in sync. And when that's known like through and through, then you don't have a conflict about conflict. You don't have a problem with, things not lining up. You don't have it's just not an issue if people have two different approaches. Or it can be an issue, but not, it just doesn't have the same hold on you, or you used some other phrase a moment ago. It's just not as central or something.
I don't know how I said
It's
it either.
the same kind of pull or whatever.
Attachment or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that full circle for me. That's sort of where I was trying to bring it back.
Yeah. And so then you don't have that division of like wholeness versus, separateness, or wholeness versus problem, or that's just another layer of division,
Yeah. And then there's like, but you made you made a separate distinction earlier related to this.
Okay. What did I say?
I'm going to have to try to recreate it. It was something along the lines of conflict happens with your husband, but well, I don't remember how you put it, so let me take it out of the context of your relationship.
Yeah.
There's, horrendous abusive conflict.
Sure.
Where people are unconscious and they're hurting each other deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another kind of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the universe of what you were just saying, even the horrendous unconscious conflict is the one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And conflict doesn't have to necessarily be that way.
Right.
As we awaken and become more present to who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Conflict will still manifest. It's still part of the totality.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to have that sense of, well, it doesn't have to be so destructive, but also it doesn't have to be rooted in terror.
Mm-hmm.
Like fundamental human.
It doesn't have to be, but it does tend to be.
For you?
Could be if I'm, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's one thing I got to point out is I'm, sitting in a really comfortable life. I don't have my family being shot at, or, I'm not in the midst of horrendous abuse. I don't know.
That's the puzzle. I think that conversation is the puzzle.
Well, I think I can say this, that in my own life, if put under enough stressors, things don't, I don't behave in such a calm way, or skillful even.
Like that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's really touching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that it's funny how people have all these ideas in their mind about what things would, what people would look like, and, when they're at home. And, I get to see all the up close stuff. Like, we all don't know how to operate everything on the computer, or we all don't know how to face every situation with every given psychological makeup, and even if we've known really deep states or really clear, there can be territory that's new for us, and there's the whole learning process of all that stuff. And there can be limits that we all come up against, physically, just in terms of our bandwidth or energy or schedule, whatever. And so these ideas of enlightenment as like superhuman are something that I don't subscribe to at this point, Even like my teacher Yogananda, that people, really many people think of him as, superhuman avatar. He had his limits, and he had challenges, and he had things he had to navigate and find his way with that just didn't naturally, unfold. And so I feel really grateful to have that more sober view, and still have such deep respect and high regard for human beings who hold forth, in spite of limitation, hold forth like in spite of challenges or difficulty, but it doesn't define them ultimately, or any of us ultimately. So I find that really heartening, that we can embrace our humanness, and know all the while that, we're not confined to those borders, or those parameters or definitions. But with that, regard for our humanness, somehow it, the humanness feels redeemed, and, in a sense, lifted up, by spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, game time. We'll make it quick. Yeah. All right. It's a game of this or that.
This or that.
I'll ask you a this or that, and you'll tell me what you prefer. So we'll start easy.
Is this personality questions for my personality?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you could pull that out of it.
Okay.
Well, you'll tell me if you think that. So the first one, coffee or tea?
Coffee, tea.
Okay. Yeah. Would you rather be able to fly or breathe underwater?
Probably breathe underwater. Just because I feel like I've flown already.
Okay. Batman or Superman?
Batman or Superman? Wow. drawing a blank on those ones. What could Batman do again?
Batman's sort of like the Dark Knight he's referred to as, because he's tortured, but he's a human who's got lots of technology around him and martial arts skills, but he's not magical.
Oh.
Superman is very much magical.
Tough one. I guess I'll have to pick Superman.
I love that you didn't know either one of them.
Yeah. Well, I know Superman pretty well.
You do?
From the movies.
Yeah, from the movies.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's the two questions I ask everybody, and I've been imagining what you would say. So the first one is, would you rather have enlightenment or $1 billion?
$1 billion?
$1 billion. Enlightenment or $1 billion?
Well, you can't have enlightenment. It's like a trick question. Yeah, you can't have it, so.
I love it. I've been wanting to ask you that question for 6 months.
Yeah. Did you know I was going to say that?
Yes, I knew you were going to say that. Okay.
But I really wouldn't want $1 billion either, so.
You wouldn't want the money?
No.
You just, well, I mean, you could give it away.
Yeah.
You don't even want to do that?
Not particularly.
So you just stay exactly as you are.
I don't know about that either, but, I don't have a desire for $1 billion. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Here's the last question.
It kind of sounds like a headache, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Totally.
But, who knows? Maybe I would love it.
Maybe?
Who knows?
If it were forced on you.
Yeah. Maybe I would just go, okay, let's have fun. Yeah.
All right. Last question.
Or do good. Yeah.
Or do good.
Yeah, but that's, true. It's a whole...
That's a can of worms.
Yeah.
If you had to either live for eternity, infinity, forever, or die in the next 5 minutes, which would it be?
Which would it be?
Yeah.
Well, you're laughing like you already know my answer or something. Like, yeah. Well, what we are is eternity already. Yeah. So I guess I'll pick that one.
But that's still not an answer.
Huh?
But still.
Live for eternity in this body.
Yeah, well, live forever or die in the next 5 minutes.
You mean live forever is
all I can tell you.
Oh, all you can tell me.
Those are the only words that I can give you. You got to choose.
Well, I guess I would. I don't have a real great answer.
This is the hard one for everybody.
It is?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like in my spirit, it's already gonna live forever, and I also feel like I die in every moment, so I kind of feel like I got it covered. But I guess if I thought of being in this body forever, I think I'd rather die. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for playing.
You're welcome.
It was a great pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh.
I'll let you know as soon as we're posting it.
Oh, great. Okay, well, it's been great talking to you, and at some level, I feel like I can feel everybody out there who's gonna listen to this. So hello, and I'm wishing you all tremendously well.
Well, that's it for our interview with Mukti, folks. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Mukti or her teachings, you can find her at adyashanti.org. That's adyashanti.org. And I'll put a link directly to her page on that site in the show notes. If you liked what you heard on our show today, please subscribe to us on iTunes. It makes a big difference when you do that. Please also consider donating to our Patreon campaign. We're on a mission to crush shame, as you know, and every penny really helps. You can find our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out via one of our platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both @together_show, or you can email me at host at together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director and my one and only is Aubrey Pick. Thanks once again to Mukti. Can't wait for the next interview. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.